So, too many wires here, no? So, one moment. Okay. Can you hear me, everyone? Okay. So, good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Monotype and Anna, for the invitation. Thank you, Good Patch, for inviting us here. It's been a pleasure for me. So starting, I'm going to talk to you about context. And looking this word, it's similar to, it comes from the Latin word contextere, which means merging together. And for me, it's interesting because it shows an action. Context also in most cases refers to the environment we live. And since we are strongly linked to places, at least from the human being point of view, it's very important, the argument of Heidegger, we are and we take place, and has been one of the most important discussions in philosophy. But I'm not going to talk about contextualism here. So you see that context has different manifestations, and see that these are the contexts that have been so far, from Morphy on the top left, on the bottom left picture, which is a tiny small village in Greece, where I grew up, to New York, to Athens, to New York, and to the Ecuadorian highlands. I've been always try to find these associations among different places, and somehow all these places follow me until here in Berlin, which, to be honest, I feel a little bit out of context without wearing black or having tattoos, but anyway. So for me, representing and expressing cultural and contextual meaning is important in order to understand the existing setting and cultivate a new one. We were saying with Hannah, I was having fun creating this kind of collages. We were saying with Hannah the other day, I grew up in a small village and my father didn't put, for me, David Bowie's records. So I was having fun placing David Bowie in my village context. How it would be if he had like a concert there. And what if also a super mega Korean town will be plugged into the Ecuadorian highlands of the north? So as you see in this rendering on the top, it's nice, no? So context, as we said, includes physical and non-physical elements, like customs, myths, stories, and living habits, but most importantly, memories. So hold on this particular word, memories, because we're going to get back to it. So I'm going to start with Ecuador and my journey there. In 2012, the Ecuadorian government decided that they don't want their country's economy to be based on oil exports, because actually this doesn't bring back something to the country in the long term, and also it ruins the landscape, the environment there. So instead they want to export knowledge. And so they invested some millions of dollars to create this new knowledge in the north called Yachai, similar to Silicon Valley in Palo Alto and to Shenzhen in China. So this was a joint venture project with South Korea to create this new city and to bridge actually the gap between academia and industry. And since the new city will be a free economic zone, many companies like Microsoft, Cisco Systems, China Telecom have already set up units there. The area that the new city, which is called Yachai, is going to be built looks like this. It is located in the north, in a canton which is called Urcucuy, which was one of the most fertile lands in Ecuador, and also it's one of the poorest regions in the country. So when we were there, we were amazed about this beauty of the place and also with people's hospitality. And in this area, there are so many small different communities, so many small communities like my village. I was feeling attached to this. And all these village constellations, they have population between 100 and 300 people, bigger ones like, above 3,000 people. And these people come from different ethnic enclaves, different ethnic groups, but the majority is indigenous and Afro-Ecuadorian. Most of them, they don't speak Spanish. They speak Quechua or different variations of Quechua. And these people have been working in this land, and they don't have any ownership there. So this is how Yachai, the city of knowledge, would look like in this fully development. Actually, they're going to be up above all these little constellations. The bottom left picture, it is a kind of plan that it was developed by a Korean company, which looks actually identical with all the other plans that this company developed in China and in Korea. But however, what I want to say also, it's that next to Yachai, it's an already existing city, Bara, as you see with the yellow outline, which has similar population like Yachai. So our argument here, after analyzing all the existing urban and ethnic enclaves in the region, ecologies, open spaces, building typologies, and social structures in Ibarra, is to transfer the fundamentals of the Yachai program to Ibarra and present an alternative spatial model, a disaggregated and distributed system of knowledge nodes. Our main argument is to combine indigenous and formal scientific systems, knowledge systems, and with existing institutional assets, and produce richer and more variegated urban spaces and conditions within this context. So this is how some of these educational nodes will look like, reinforcing the existing urban patterns in the periphery of Ibarra, which right now it has a lot of gaps. And these are series of learning and production clusters, each to include educational facilities and spaces for all. And actually, from the toddler to the postdoc, we would like to embrace knowledges from the traditional to the high-tech. So, starting with unknown words, this is the first one. This is Genius Loci, which in Latin means spirit of the place. So genius is the spirit that defines the character of a person, of a place. And I'm referring to this term because I believe it's the most inclusive term to describe the context in architecture. Because Genius Loci refers to both physical and non-physical elements. And locus, which is actually rooted from Genius Loci, used by many architects in the 60s, to describe the particularity of every place and the connections between physical and non-physical elements. So just to be clear with you, you will hear actually a lot of architects talking about context and the importance of context by retaining all these historical facades and bringing back the forms from the classicism. We're not talking about form preservation here. History can never be revived. It can only be understood and be taken as a base of knowledge. So moving from Morphy to Athens, you can see a big change that happened for me. No wondering why. I have been always intrigued by urban and rural patterns and cityscapes because all these elements for me was keys to the image of the city and of a place. So I started producing maps and images in order to express my understanding of the city I was living in. And all these layers of history, for example, that Athens hides underneath, or all this kind of place that I was visiting every day from my house to my university, for example. And then I realized that all these images were not only key elements for me, for this image of the city, but also for the people that I coexist. We coexist in the same environment. So showing, for example, this image to my friends, they recognize something from Athens, some places that they've been and they related to. So there is a sense that all of us, we have of a place, which includes all the physical and symbolic values in nature and human environment. And this is Genius Loci. So moving on, this French philosopher named Halbachs talked about memories, or more specific about collective memories. And you remember when we talked about before the non-physical elements of context? This is another one. So Halbachs argued that the memory is a matter of how minds work together in a society. And it's also in society that we recall, we recognize, and localize our memories. And if we look around us, this existing urban or natural landscape, the context that we coexist, it gives a sense of community representation. And it's the same, I would say, as our house or our room gives a sense of representation of ourselves or the people that we live with. I mean, although a house has more, provides a more intimate and clear representation through smell, through the objects that we touch, through the shape of our bodies in the bed. But let's get back to urban context. I like to switch between domestic and urban scale always. And since I'm going to talk about Athens, I would like to show you the scale between one block of Berlin and the block of Athens, for example, the urban blocks, to compare. And the way that I recognize all these void spaces within the blocks, for me, it's similar to rooms of the house. I mean, they're important, although they are hidden and inaccessible in most of the cases in Athens. So moving around the streets in Athens and discovering all these voids, all these urban rooms, I would say, I realized that most of them work as depositories of memories of the people that they live around them. And choosing a study area in the center of Athens, for example, you can clearly see inaccessible voids within the urban blocks, and all these passages that are marked with a blue color are stoas, these linear open spaces that we call them in Greek stoas, and they are public accessible linear spaces. And they look like this. They're super narrow, without light. And I was imagining what it would be if we tear down the walls in the end of this corridor. I mean, what we will see behind. Maybe a new whole world will appear, or maybe I would see my village back, I don't know. Maybe I was being very sentimental. So my argument here, after analyzing and detail mapping all these void spaces and linear passages in the center of Athens, is to tear down all these walls of them in order to access the other side. And it would be interesting to see what everyone's envision is this for this hidden space. I mean, this is my own idea, a cultural space, but since this is an open project and in discussion with the city of Athens, I would like to hear all your ideas about this. So moving to New York, I started a project about collective spaces. And I use the term here collective and social and not architectural space because of its multidimensional characteristics, which are better captured by social sciences and not architecture. And the formation of these spaces are totally determined by people's actions and not the opposite. So borrowing the term from Habragen, I started analyzing how all this urban space, from the domestic scale till the scale of the city, can be understood as a discontinuous collective space containing different levels of collective use. And as collective space can be an open space or a closed space, for me it is not always happily appropriated or harmonically used by all citizens. Collective is not a fancy word for public. It includes different shades of individual or collective use, and it operates on public and as well as on private properties. The most important element that defines the collective space is the fact that it is read, claimed, appropriated, and used in different ways from different people. So is it possible to find such places in New York, in this super rigid, highly designed urban environment? This is how Manhattan's rectangular grid adopted in 1811 looks like. And this is an area that I chose, which is in East Harlem. El Barrio, it's called, from its people. And if we start mapping all these kind of void spaces within the blocks, all these are kind of open spaces, all these community gardens, all these little places that they are, I mean, open space that they're next to buildings, the grid starts looking like this. So it starts losing its regularity somehow. And these are all the doors of every single dwelling. These are all these kind of halls of on the rigid street walls. And All these can be the interior entrances or opening to the urban voids, which in this case, I mean, now we call them courtyards. And if we try to connect all these entrances, openings, and urban voids together, the grid of Manhattan may look like this. And these can be alternative routes and connections for people to experience the city, not walking on the big avenues or streets, but within the blocks. And if we cut a section through the urban block, we would experience something like this. So multiple overlap scenarios on alternative routes, multiple ways to experience the city. So, and moving back from New York to Europe, I was trying to find new ways and new ways of working. And for an epilogue for this talk, I decided to choose a photo from my grandparents' house in my village, in Morphy, because I have always remembered this as a ruin, as something that it is abandoned. And I started with Ecuadorian countryside. I want to finish with somehow with the Greek countryside. Because I believe that it has been paid little attention to the countryside and to the rural areas from architects and urban designers. Actually, urban design is something that contradicts with the rural design, I would say. And in these areas, changes happen sometimes faster than the cities, for me. And we are together with a group of people, of professionals from different backgrounds, and with local agents, we envision new lives for these abandoned places and in this kind of new context. So terms like space appropriation, terms like inhabiting, collectiveness, they have different meaning in spaces like that. And for the end, I walk you through my interpretation of context in architecture through my work and through through concepts like spirit of the place or collective memories or rooms of memories. Because for me, in the end, my work actually aims to trigger your own interpretations, associations, and actions in this place that we coexist. Thank you.